right, so we're introducing how to layer with color pencil to make a realistic rendering. This will be helpful for your new project because part of your image needs to be done in contour line and part of it needs to be done in color pencil. So we want to learn how to use what we've learned about graphite and apply it to layering for color pencil. And to start with, we're just going to work with one of the fake fruits or vegetables that are here in the classroom bin, just because it's a single form, it's easy to work with, and we can start to apply some of the techniques that you're going to learn in the layering it up worksheet that you'll have. You'll get one of these in class. It has the color images and the 5 steps to creating finished color pencil rendering, also some helpful hints on how to layer color pencil. This is also available in the Unit 1 Color Basics folder on Schoology. You'll notice inside that Unit 1 folder there was a watercolor folder that we've already explored during our watercolor unit, but then there's a second folder called Color Pencil, and that's where you'll find this as well as some other helpful information about how to work with colored pencils. So we are going to be working with just a fruit that you select out of the bin. In this case, I'm working with a pear. You need to draw it at least life size on one page of your sketchbook. So I'm going to set the pear in front of me so that I can see it, but then also leave it so that I can see the cast shadows around the base of it as well, and you can kind of see them a little bit there under the edge. I don't want to put that too close to the middle because then you won't be able to see my drawing. But I want to draw life size, and I want to draw from the perspective that I'm seeing the pear, not from it being like that, but actually from the angle that it sits in front of me. So in this case, I can see the whole top. I can see where the stem comes out. If I drew it from the side, it would just be a profile, and I don't want that. I want it to actually look like the way that I'm actually seeing it. So I'm going to start with starting to sketch the sides just lightly, looking at the shape that's in front of me. You could certainly start with a contour line so that you could get the ant crawling along if that's been helpful for you. I would definitely make sure that you're looking at the shape before you. Don't guess and just think you know. Really study the shapes. So I'm going to refine my shape now because I kind of got the lightly in place, and I want to be able to show you what this looks like once I have this in place. And it's not a symmetrical form. There's shapes and things that are formed within the structure. Okay, and then there's my stem. All right, so I have my shape. The next thing I want to make sure that I'm looking at is the layering of the cast shadows. So I'm going to put those lightly in place. And because we have multiple light sources here in the classroom, you're going to have multiple rings of light. Now, setting your fruit or vegetable on the tabletop where you sit, you may not be able to see all of those layers. So you may want to put it on a piece of white paper so you can see it a little bit better. I'm noticing that my darkest portion is right in here. It overlaps a bit there. All right, so I basically have, well, there's a third light. Let me put that one in place. All right, so I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 cast shadows that are occurring because I have at least 4 light sources here that are throwing light onto my subject and creating those cast shadows. So now that I have everything lightly drawn in place, now I'm going to start working with the color pencil. And in order to do that, I want to make sure that I'm referring to my layering it up guide. So step 1 is roughing in the local color. It says first colors I put down are local colors. These are the simple colors our mind attaches to an object. Here I've represented the bell pepper using 3 distinct shades of green. The orange banana pepper is 2 regions of the local color. Red-orange for most of the pepper and yellow-orange for the stripe along its far edge and the highlight area. So I need to keep my color transparent, as the next sentence says, but I also need to look at the actual colors that are apparent in my pear. Obviously it's a green pear. So I'm going to work with multiple greens. So I've got kind of this very chartreuse kind of green for the lighter areas. I'm definitely going to pick out the olive green, which is going to give me more of those deeper tones. And then I need a mid green This one's pretty nice. I think that's going to work well. So I got those three. I feel like in spots there's a little bit of a brightness to it, so I'm going to use a little bit of this spring green as well. So I have 4 greens that I'm going to work with to create the skin of this pear, and you can see it's got these lighter areas which I'm going to be able to hit with this chartreuse to create that. The olive is going to be primarily most of it, but then I've also got these darker areas that are going to get this olive green. And then I still feel like I have some bits, I won't use this heavy, but I'll be able to use this to create highlights and things within the pear skin. All right, so I'm ready to start, and it looks like I want to begin first with my lightest color, and that's going to be this chartreuse. And just like with our graphite pencil, holding from the unsharpened end and lightly in small overlapping ovals, just getting the color into the highlight areas. So I have a little bit up there, I've got some over here, and I've got a larger patch in here that I'm going to insert. So again, using those overlapping ovals, and I'm not putting a heavy coat down. Hopefully you can see that a little bit in the video. This is pretty light. It's a light color, and I'm applying it in a light surface, so I'm not pressing super hard. All right, so that's my highlight areas. And next I'm going to work with my next value, which is going to be this olive green. And I'm going to be putting the olive green over the majority. And I'm going to blend it toward my highlights that I just put in place, but I don't want to run it over the top of my highlights. I'm going to leave those highlights there. So I'm going to be putting this over most of the pear skin. So now I'm going to work with my darker color. This is the olive green, and I know that this zone through here has a lot of darker values. There's some through here, and of course down at the bottom where it's sitting on the tabletop, it's going to have some darker values too. So I want to start to work with this deepest color, and I'm still on my layer 1, so I don't want this to be super dark. I'm not pushing super hard. This is my darkest color, so yes, it's going to stand out more, but I do not want to press hard. This is still very light, and if you look at your layering it up guide, you'll notice that it says keep that first layer light. And I'm just going to add in where I see this darker value kind of peeking out in this bits of the skin. I want to get that in place. right, so I feel like I've got my first layer. You can compare it to your first layer here. I can definitely see where my lights and darks are, where they're starting to appear. So that's a good first layer. So now I'm going to look at step 2, which is coloring depth. It says, I think this layer is an opportunity to deepen and enrich colors by using the analogous hues. The colors are applied to the highlight areas and the shadows within the objects. For example, in the bell pepper, the lobes closest to me receive the glaze of lemon yellow, and the lobes so it pops up the surface, while the far edges got distant looking violet. So now I need to think about what are the analogous colors to green, which is all I've used so far. So yellow is going to be next to green on the color wheel, and on the other side of green are like turquoise, blue, greens, and blue. So I'm going to select some colors out from my set, and I want to work with maybe like an aqua tone, which is going to be kind of the blue-green. I'm going to grab, if I can find, I want a nice deep blue, which I'm looking for indigo blue. Indigo blue will help. Yep, here, indigo blue is a really, really, really dark navy blue. I think that will help in my shadow areas. I do need some yellows, and I'm thinking I'm going to work with the lemon yellow pencil. So I have lemon yellow, indigo blue, and I've got aquamarine. I'm thinking I probably need another yellow. If I can find like a yellow green, that would be great. So let's see. I have yellow chartreuse, which I know is really, really bright, but I think I'm going to give it a try. I actually have this color called apple green too, which I think will be helpful. Even though it's another green, it's got a lot of yellow in it, so I'm going to work with that as well. So these are my analogous colors. So for step 2, you can see where I'm going to be enhancing the colors. I'm going to be layering in, starting to deepen. If you compare the two, you can see that the color's getting much stronger, starting to get more of the shadow tones in, as well as highlights are enhanced. So that's my next step. So I'm going to start by enhancing around my highlights and then start to work into some of my shadow areas. Remember, this is a layer, so it's not a finished value. So you want to continue to build still in light layers. So I'm going to add this into my highlight zones. All right, so now I've got the analogous colors in place. So I've worked with the blue, I worked with this aqua color, I worked with a yellow, green, and 2 yellows. So now I've got layer 2 kind of in place. I'm starting to see where the shadow tones, where the lights and darks are, where my highlights are popping out, and it's a process of layering those together. So now I'm going to move on to step 3, and in this case it says I use indigo blue to layer the shadows on the surface around the bell peppers. Although in this example I'm drawing the cast shadows on white paper, in actual painting I would add, when she says painting, these are the words of an artist that, these are my drawings, but these are the words of somebody who's a professional color pencil artist. She calls them paintings when she does her color pencil drawings. She said, I'd add the shadows over the completed background. Drawing the shadow layer on top of the background's completed color layers gives more realism to the shadows. It's important to note that the shadows deepest to the object, the shadows are deepest to the next to the object and lighten as they move away from the object. So you can see here the shadows are darkest against and get lighter as they move away from the object. Like a tonal bar, I did add some indigo blue to deepen the shadows around the stem of all 3 vegetables. So in this case, I'm working with only indigo blue. All shadow, cast shadows, since we're working with these being on a light white surface, indigo blue is your only pencil no matter what fruit or vegetable you're working with. Only indigo blue. There is only 1 in your set, so this is a step that when you get there, you'll need this pencil. If you're not there, you could actually move on to step 4 in the process and then come back to this when the indigo blue pencil is available. So now I want to actually look at the shadows that are around the base of my fruit and see, like this one I know is going to be my darkest shadow, and then this one's the next value, then this one, then this one, then this one. So this is my lightest one. So I want to make sure that I'm looking at the parts of the shadow and where they are deepest. Now I know that this one is my darkest, so I'm going to go ahead and fill that in. I'm holding close to the point because I want to have a lot of control. Normally when we're working with color pencil, I hold closest to the unsharpened end, but in this case I want to get a lot of control because I want to get a very concentrated dark value right next to the fruit, and I don't want to have that. I don't want to have the edges compromised. I want them as strong and clean as I can get them. All right, so that's my deepest shadow tone. So this section here is my next value. So I'm going to work on overlapping ovals. But I want to get a one step away from that. So kind of like when we did our value scales. So this would be like that second block next to the darkest one. All right, so that's my second one. My third darkest value is going to be this cast shadow, this internal shape there. So it's going to be one step lighter than that. And then I'm going to be working with my last shadow tone, which is going to be super light. So this would be like your first or second block on your value scale. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and now 5. And so now I'm going to work on this side. I do have this little tiny piece here, which I think is pretty equal to this that I didn't see before. So I'm going to make sure that that's darker. Try to get it about the same value as this part, because that's part of where those shadows overlap. Okay, so this is my lightest shadow, and I'm going to try to keep this super duper light, because it's got to be lighter than this one, and I just made that one, and it's very, very light. So holding my pencil way out near the unsharpened end, overlapping ovals that are very, very soft. Now I do have a pencil line there that I'll want to erase. All right, so now I've got my cast shadows in place. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 values within the cast shadow. And so now I'm going to flip over to my back side of the paper. So step 4 is color tuning. At this point, the drawing is beginning to take form. Some colors still need to be adjusted at this point, but there's a solid foundation. I stepped up the contrast in the green pepper skin, deepened the mid-range with 2 different green pencils, blended over the whole body of the vegetable, and added violet in the shadows. So for mine, clearly this is still washed out in comparison to color. So I definitely want to continue to step up my values. I'm going to return to some of the colors that I used in the first round to start to build. I'm going to start to really build onto those layers. So I'm going to work with, actually I think I'm going to work with these 3 primarily. We can see those work pretty well with the skin tones that are in there. And those are the 3 that I'm going to work with over the whole surface of the pear skin, just to keep enhancing it and to keep getting the values built up. So this one is the lightest of the 3, so I'm going to be working, increasing pressure across the highlight area. And I want to make sure that I'm getting some of this over most of the skin, because I do like the way that this creates that warm green tone. In the shadow areas, I'm still going to layer it in there as well, just because I feel like this is a good base color for the pear skin. And then the other 2 will go over it to enhance more of the skin texture. All right, so I've got a good tone all the way across. Now I do know that it said to use violet in some of the shadow areas, so I'm going to find either violet or purple in my set here and see if I can enhance some of those areas to kind of rich up the tones that are in there. So I'm not seeing the purple pencil that I like to use, but I've got one called violet, so I'm going to work with a little bit of that. So it said definitely around the stem area, so I'm going to see if I can punch that color up just a bit with the, and again I'm going in small circles, but I want to have a lot of control, and I'm not going just around the stem, but I'm kind of extending that out. There's a dimple in the texture of the pear over here. And the other thing I want to notice on this is there is kind of this speckle of red tone across the front of the pear. And I'm noticing layering this purple on top is kind of giving me that color. So I'm going to do some layering with some of this purple. And I'm not going to make it uniform because it should, I want it to look kind of like that spatter that we see there. But I'm not going to do it by poking. I don't want to do that because that's just going to mess up my paper. So I'm going to create some lights and darks all through that zone where that speckle is taking place. And since the paper has a little bit of texture to it, it should pick up well and create that texture. Spots, shading some spots in there. All right, so lastly, my step 5 is going to be adding details, texture lines, and highlights to finish this demonstration. Lastly, I added the complement color. Green's complement is red, so I'll be working with a red pencil on my green pear as well. In the deepest shadow areas of the green pepper, and in small bits in the detail areas, and obviously on the red peppers in this case, since red and green are, the green was added to the red and the red was added to the green because they are complements. Applying more indigo blue and violet completed the cast shadow and the drawing is finished. So I'm going to continue to work with indigo blue, and it's also said to add the complement, so I'm going to work with some crimson red in my deepest shadow areas and to enhance that. So I'm first going to start with the indigo blue, and I like the way the indigo blue was really stepping up the darkest values before, so I'm going to add some indigo blue over the top of some of my shadow tones, blending into those lighter tones, but I want to keep it, I don't want it to look like a blue pear, but I definitely want the blue to enhance what I have. You can already see right there where I've added it, it's already starting to really bring the color out. this point I feel like the layering is pretty much done. I went ahead and used 3 different colors in the stem, not colors you might typically think, but I used violet, indigo blue, and olive green to create the stem tones. And I did put in some shadowing on it. It may be hard to see in the video, but there actually is like a rounding of that surface, kind of like we did with our sphere. You know, there's highlight on this side and shadow on this side, so I tended to round that out a bit. So at this point I've got my shadows in place. I've layered a ton of colors. All of these in fact were used to shade the pear, and you'll have a likely grouping as well. So make sure that you've got highlights so you can see where light is hitting the object. You should have the stem finished. If there's not a stem on your fruit or vegetable, you could draw one on. You want to make sure you have your layered shadow, that you've got any detail and textures that might be present. And you definitely want to make sure that you've added that complementary color into your shadow areas as a glaze. It's a light glaze over the top. So once you feel like you've got your fruit or vegetable fully rendered, and then you can take a picture of it and upload that to the assignment on Schoology. All right, well, good luck.